Hello, welcome to Who's On Next, the only podcast that has a prize inside. Today I have with me a man who's had a long career in the animation industry, working in films like Roger Rabbit, Aladdin, Prince of Egypt, and many other films. It is Tom Sito.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's very hot today.
Mm.
It's hot today, and it's sad because it was actually getting really nice recently. It was actually becoming fall weather, and then it became 85 degrees again today.
Oh my, yeah. In Los Angeles, September is like August part two. Like it doesn't really start to cool off till October. So we're kind of used to it, you know.
I say this time last year, even in October, it was still like 75, 80 degrees by like
Wow.
Halloween, I think last year. It's
Oh,
weird.
mm.
Southern East Coast, it depends. Sometimes it's like actual fall weather once you hit the fall, or sometimes August weather carries over until like October.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And the occasional hurricane. So
Yeah, thank God we haven't had any of those so
yeah,
far. So
yeah.
far. All right, so I guess what is it that got you your start in animation? Like where did it all start?
Well, I grew up in New York City. I lived in Brooklyn before it was cool, when it was a dump, and and I went to public school, and I could draw a little, and I noticed that the class artists didn't get beat up as much, so I started drawing a lot, and back in the 50s and 60s, the big thing was comic strips. Like to get the daily newspaper and all, and be all the comic strips were there. And originally I thought, boy, wouldn't it be great to do a comic strip? No. And then I went to a magnet high school in Manhattan called the High School of Art and Design. A lot of really nice people came out of there, like Keith Haring and Ralph Bakshi, and which even Tony Bennett, the singer. But when I was there, my teachers showed me how to do animation, and I was like, "Ooh, this looks like fun." And then I found out that you could do it for a living, and I went to an early meeting of a group called the SIFA, which is the International Animator Society, and the New York chapter. And we would all show up at this school, and all the professionals were there saying to each other, "You got a job? No. You got a job? No." But at least they were talking. So I said, "Wow, I want to be part of this group." And then one thing led to another. Really, at the time, the film business and animation in particular was going through a shift, like the late 70s and all, because the Golden Age generation, the World War II generation, were retiring, and young punks like me, the boomers and stuff, were just coming in. So you would get an entry level job on a production, and all the people at the entry level were like in their teens and 20s, and then the main animators were in their 60s, and there was very few people in between. And I think that was because there was a long downturn of production through the 1960s, where the major studios were closing down, and they were bulldozing their backlots and turning them into shopping malls and all, and everything was just TV spots and all, Sesame Street, things like that. And the second wave didn't really start to come on until about the mid '80s. We started to get the big movies like American Tail and Great Mouse Detective, and then of course Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Right. Well, because I know after Walt Disney passed away, wasn't it also a thing they like the Nine Old Men still stayed on at
Hmm.
Disney even after he passed away, correct? Because didn't Milt Kahl stay until he had like basically retired?
Oh yeah. He stayed till about 1977. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so these, because it's the kind of job that, it's not like being a stuntman or a football player or something where you're 35 and you're thinking of retiring. It's you could just keep doing it, as long as you want to. And I think part of the problem there was this gap was that a lot of the master artists at these main studios just stayed until they were almost too old, and I think it was like in the late 70s at Disney, they were suddenly thinking, "Oh God, we're mortal. You know, we better start training people because there's nobody behind us." You know? And that was the case for a lot of studios. And then suddenly there's like, I was, I worked for Richard Williams, the great British director, and Dick had me assist Grim Natwick, who was the artist who designed Betty Boop.
Oh my God.
Amazing man, God bless him. He lived to be 100 years old,
Oh my God.
and he had a huge party. We threw a huge party for him in 1990 for all his friends, and he had so much fun he died. But that's what he wanted. That's what he wanted to do. He said a lot of my family are long livers, but nobody's hit 100. I'm going to hit 100. I'm going to have a drink with my buddies, and then I'll go. Okay, So we threw a huge party for him, like 500 people. It was like Chuck Jones, Friz Freleng, the Nine Old Men, like everybody from that generation. And then 2 months later, he died. And one of his assistants, who's an old man, was saying, Grim, I feel so sad you're dying. And Grim goes, well, what do you want? 200? Yeah, that's true.
I had always heard that thing when Senor Wences passed away in like the late '90s. I remember it was he died, I think, like 2 days after his like 103rd birthday, like something like that. It was the same kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. There's a great art director named Tyrus Wong, Tai Wong. There's a documentary about him called Tyrus, and I think it was on Disney Plus or Netflix, I think. Anyway, Tyrus lived to be 107, and he was the art director of Bambi. He did a lot of beautiful work on Bambi and all, and plus a lot of other Hollywood movies.
Oh, didn't he just he passed away a few years ago, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. He used to go down to Santa Monica Beach and fly kites all the time. He liked to fly kites, and he had a big sweater with writing on it that said, "This is what 107 looks like." No, really, really sweet man.
Well, if I recall, I think wasn't there is it like I don't remember if it was the reason, but wasn't I know when Don Bluth left Disney, wasn't it because there was like a weird because of like the gap between the Nine Old Men and like the younger generation that were working at Disney? I thought like Bluth had said something about that once before as to like why he left.
Yeah. I mean, Don's 88 now, so like he's up there too, but yeah. I mean that time period of the late 70s, early 80s. As the Nine Old Men pull back, and everybody else is being promoted. It's tough, because Walt Disney was treated like the Dalai Lama or something. You just didn't question Walt Disney. Whatever Walt Disney said, yes, you did it. Period. And then when Walt was gone, he had surrounded himself with a lot of people who just took orders all the time, and so they were looking at each other like, well, who's giving the orders now? And among the trainees, everybody's on more or less the same level. I mean, with the Nine Old Men, you still had Willie Reitherman, and Willie Reitherman was this fantastic animator. He did the Monstro the Whale and Pinocchio, and did a lot of beautiful work with with Goofy and all. And so it's one thing taking orders from a Nine Old Man genius. It's another thing taking orders from the guy next to who had been sitting next to you last week and is now in charge. and I said, and so I think there was a lot of egos kind of bumping into one another, because remember you had, besides Don, Brad Bird was an animator there, the director, and John Musker, who's the director of Little Mermaid and Moana, and a lot of Henry Selick, who directed Nightmare Before Christmas and all. So there's a lot of very creative people, but like with any kind of you put together any group of creative people, you're going to have friction. Especially when people were used to just taking orders from Walt Disney.
Well, because one of my favorite books I have on my shelf over there, I have Bill Pete's autobiography, and
Oh
I
yeah,
remember he talked about that because he talked about how him and like how he kind of didn't really. It's like he respected Walt, but he didn't like him. Like
yeah,
he talked
yeah.
about that quite a bit, which I was actually very fascinated by because he talked
Hmm.
about like a lot of that kind of a lot of relationships at the Disney company that were like that. And I remember he explicitly mentioned Walt was like one of the major ones where
Yeah,
you couldn't talk back to Walt. You, like
yeah,
you couldn't talk back to him. He could just tell you were doing something one day if you were in the middle of another project, that kind
hmm,
of thing. And it was I think he said that was one of the reasons he was so disillusioned working at
yeah.
Disney after a while.
There was, I mean, I knew a number of old story artists like Joe Grant and Vance Gary and all who were old timers, and they would tell stories about the story room because the problem is when you're an animator, you're given your assignment and you animate the scene. It doesn't work, you fix it. It doesn't work, you fix it. It works, it goes in the reel, and you get another scene. In storyboard, it's your taste and your arguments. You have an idea, and the idea doesn't go in the film, and there's always there's always a point where you go, I had a better idea there. I hate they went like with that. I like this idea better. So it's always like it's really comes down to uh, artistic taste. And the old guys told me that Bill Pete was one of the few people that could scream in Walt Disney's face and not be afraid of being fired. He says the two of them would fight like a baseball manager and an umpire, like over a call strike. They just be yelling at one another and stuff. And he said one guy said that Bill Pete actually once picked up a bottle of India ink and threw it at Walt's head, and and it hit the wall. And Walt said, "I'm not cleaning that up. You're cleaning that up. You're gonna clean that up."
Well, I remember I think one of the last stories I think Bill had in his book was him talking about how he had gotten like him and Walt had gotten into like such a fight at one point that I think he like demoted him to working on like Peter Pan peanut butter commercials or something like that. I think that was like one of the last stories he had when he worked at the company
Yeah.
was like him and I think he said like I don't even remember what the fight was about. I just remember we got in such a bad fight that he just said, "All right, you're working on the ad division and you're working in the peanut butter commercials now. You're doing."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's Walt Disney's a fascinating character too. Because he wasn't the best artist in the place, but he was a great storyteller. He was a great manager, and he is great at casting people. He knew how to get the best people and get the best work out of them. And but he had faults. A problem I have. I interact with a lot of Disney historians, and you always run into the people that believe the magic. That Walt Disney was like a secular Santa Claus or something. He was always like this delightful. He was Uncle Walt. And the thing is, Walt made up that character. He's even quoted as saying, "I'm not Walt Disney. I drink. Walt Disney doesn't drink. I like. I smoke. Walt Disney doesn't like to smoke." And he swore too. He was a normal person. He was just a normal person, but all the publicity makes him out to be like jovial Uncle Walt. Everybody's like happy uncle, and sometimes you have to say, "Look, I'm not tearing the guy down. I'm just trying to be, I like to study the real person." To and not perpetuate this kind of like myth. And what I found interesting about it is that when you cut through it and you just hear the regular stuff, and the story meetings was where these things really come out. Disney would say, "I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I like that." Like there's a famous story about Mark Davis was designing a feature film based on the Chanticleer, which is from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales.
Right, yeah.
The rooster story.
Yeah, they that Bluth turned into a Rockadoodle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So Mark had a team and of several about half a dozen artists, and they spent 3 months and spent thousands of dollars to develop this whole idea of the Chanticleers. And and Walt came in and looked at everything, and they pitched everything for him, and he looked at it, and he said, "People won't go to the theater to see a movie about a chicken." And then he walked out.
Well, if I that was the movie that was originally going to be what Sleeping Beauty was, or not what Sleeping Beauty was, but I think that was the movie that was supposedly around the time Sleeping Beauty was
Yeah,
pitched. I think
yeah,
something
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
yeah. So there's I mean, my friend Charles Solomon wrote a book just of the movies that were never made. It's called The Disney That Never Was. And there's all kinds of like stillborn projects, like the Emperor's Nightingale, and there's a whole bunch of those things where they started on it and then stopped. I mean, even when they were first doing Winnie the Pooh, they were storyboarding Winnie the Pooh to be a feature length film, and they brought Walt in, and they walked him through the storyboards, and Disney goes, "These characters can't hold a feature film. These are better for shorts." And he walked down the line of storyboards and he goes, "First short ends here, Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree. Second short ends here, Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day." And it's like, Winnie the Pooh and Tigger too. And the interesting thing is that each short won an Oscar. And then after Walt had died in 2012, they made a Winnie the Pooh movie, and it didn't do that well.
And that's one of the most depressing box office failures to me from Disney, because it didn't help. It also came out like the week after Harry Potter, like the final Harry Potter movie. It was like the week before Smurfs came out. Like that's one of the most like depressing like box office failures to me from Disney, because I love that movie. That's a great movie.
Yeah, it is. It's some beautiful work in it. But it's just it was one of the last hand drawn films too. So. I mean, when I started working in animation and at Disney, the most technologically advanced thing they had was electric pencil sharpener. You didn't have to turn the little crank. They were actually using editing equipment from the 1930s. They had these very old moviolas, and a friend was mentioning about how the Smithsonian Institute called Studio one time and said, "We're putting together an exhibit of industrial arts in the 20th century, media, and we heard you have 1930s vintage moviola, which is the editing machine, and we were wondering if you'd care to donate it for our exhibit." And the person at Disney said, "But we still used them." and the Smithsonian guy said, "You're kidding, right?"
Well, I think that was one of the things Bluth talked about in his book, was that they were still using very outdated stuff by the time he left, or something like that. They were still using very old processes.
Yeah, I mean, we could laugh about it now and everything, but in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, it was a problem, But then, the new management took over, Eisner and Katzenberg and Roy Disney, and they kind of shook everything up, And I knew Roy Disney really well, and Roy was a sweet man. He was a very nice man, and when you talk about billionaires, he's one of the nicest billionaires I've ever known. But the funny thing is that when he grew a mustache, he looked alarmingly like his uncle. Like he could stand in for him, and he chain smoked like his uncle did. But the great thing about Disney was that he really felt the Disney legacy. Like, it wasn't just a bunch of executives running a company. Roy would sit there and go, "People ask me if I care. I gotta care. My name's on the damn door."
Well, it's like, right. It's funny because people talk about the Uncle Walt thing. I would say for my generation, Roy Disney was almost like our version of him, because I'm nearly 30.
Hmm.
And Roy, I used to see him on DVDs and behind the scenes stuff. I was the kid who, even when I was like 5 years old, I would like watching behind the scenes
Hmm.
stuff of Disney movies. And I would see him talk about things, and he'd be on Disney Channel talking about things. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know, I always kind of viewed Roy Disney as like the modern version of Uncle Walt almost
Yeah.
because of how much stuff he appeared in from when I was a kid.
Yeah, 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 and he really was like a nice guy and everything. Yeah, he was a shrewd businessman and all. He went all through the '80s, like buying and selling companies like all the other Wall Street guys do and all. But he didn't have a solid gold toilet or a supermodel wife or anything. A penis shaped rocket ship. You know, you know, like I remember one day going off the studio lot to have lunch with a friend in the neighborhood, and I stopped into a convenience store to pick up a bottle of water, and I felt his hand clap me on the back, and he goes, "Hey Tom, how you doing?" And it's Roy Disney, and Roy was just buying himself lunch, and lunch was he bought himself $1.75 ham and cheese sandwich in the triangular cellophane that you get off a catering truck. It's like the cheapest friggin' sandwich you could possibly imagine. And here's this like billionaire, I figured this guy was raised on squab flambeau or something like that, duck l'orange, and he's getting himself a $1.75 ham and cheese sandwich. That was and nobody's watching. I mean, it's just him. So he was a really really nice man.
It feels more. It feels like it sounds like he was a lot more humble. If he was
Mm-hmm.
also if he was getting something that cheap when he could easily just have whatever he wanted, probably at that point in his career with how much money he probably had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
He was,
yeah, yeah. When we were, I think I was working in England when we started Beauty and the Beast, and we're doing the first pass on Beauty and the Beast, and everybody said, "Oh, Roy's coming on Monday. Roy's coming on Monday." Oh, I just, and when Roy showed up, he and his wife had just bought a castle in Ireland.
oh my god!
and they and the thing that he was so excited about was that they rewired the electro the whole electrical system of the castle to accept American appliances. So
Huh.
he said I could bring my Mr. Coffee and plug it in.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite things about Roy was he was the one who greenlit my favorite Disney film. That's like one of my favorite things about him because he was the one who greenlit Treasure Planet.
Oh
That's
wow!
like that's my absolute favorite Disney film. And I
Oh wow!
remember hearing the story about how like Musker and Clements I think had been trying to pitch that since like 91.
Yeah.
Something like that, and Eisner turned it down like every time. And then
Hmm.
after Hercules, they were just like, "We've given him 4 hits. We're gonna like we're gonna go to Roy and see how he feels about it." And they
Yeah.
showed Treasure Planet to Roy, and Roy was like, "This is fucking awesome. Make that movie.
Yeah.
like this
Yeah.
like make that movie."
Yeah, it's like the only reason they made a Fantasia 2000 was Roy wanted it. Walt always wanted there to be more than one Fantasia. He wanted it to be a series of concert films, and all. And when the first one, and like Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was our head of production at the time, was like, when they talked to the idea about Fantasia, he goes, the first one didn't make any money. But Roy wanted it, and so okay, so we made it, and it took a while and all, but there's some beautiful pieces in it.
Oh no, I think the Firebird is like probably one of my favorite pieces of
Hmm.
animation Disney's ever done. Is just
Hmm.
the Firebird segment and Rhapsody in Blue. Those are like
Yeah,
two of the probably the best pieces that from that period of Disney.
yeah, 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 yeah. A lot of Rhapsody was Eric Goldberg and everything.
Oh,
Who designed.
you can tell. You can
Yeah,
tell that's Eric Goldberg's style.
yeah, Yeah. Eric's a dear friend, and also he was and he was very close to Al Hirschfeld, the great caricaturist. And, that's his line. That's like they made a documentary about Hirschfeld called The Lion King. But it's saying that he had that beautiful style to his work. And Hirschfeld's another one to live to practically 100. So I had lunch with Hirschfeld when he was at the studio when we were doing Aladdin, and we were talking about longevity, and Hirschfeld said, "I read an article once about long people who live a long time, and I talked to George Bernard Shaw and Winston Churchill." And Shaw lived to like 94, and Churchill lived to like 89 or 90. And Shaw said the secret of my longevity is I don't drink, I don't smoke, I'm chaste, and I'm a vegetarian. And Churchill's like, I wake up to a shot of brandy. I smoke 20 cigars a day. Whiskey in the afternoon, champagne with dinner, brandy afterwards. And Hirschfeld said, "My conclusion is, I don't know if there's a formula. It's in your genes or it's not." You know?
I was like, have you ever seen that video of that woman who lived to be like 97 years old, and she drank like 3 things of Dr. Pepper a day for like 50 years or something like that? And they interviewed her like, "Oh, what's the secret of your long life?" And she's like, "Well, my doctors told me in the 1980s if I keep drinking Dr. Pepper every day, I'll die in the next 5 years, and I outlived him." It was like, and he died 5 years ago. I outlived him.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. The famous story about Stephen Hawking, the famous physicist, scientist, developed ALS at like 27 or something, and his doctors told him you got 2 years to live, and he lived into his 70s, and he actually outlived his doctors. It was kind of fascinating.
That's crazy to me every time I hear a story like that. I'm like, oh, you'll be dead in 5 years, and they live like 50 something years. Like after
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That's it. So it's that old saying. If you want to make God smile, tell him your plans for the future.
Well, I guess what was your first major project when you started working in the field?
Okay, well, let's see. My first big project was I was an assistant on a Richard Williams film called The Adventures of Raggedy Ann and Andy,
Ah,
musical from 1977. It was using the original Raggedy Ann characters, and the music was written by Joe Raposo, who wrote all the music for Sesame Street.
yeah.
Yeah, he wrote, It's Not Easy Being Green, all those kind of hits and all. So, and it was originally intended as a stage musical, review, and then we made it into an animated film, and it didn't do well, and all, it kind of came out and flopped. But for the young people, it was terrific because Dick Williams was really into getting a lot of the old artists to train young people and all. So he hired Art Babbitt, who was the guy who created Goofy, and again, Grim Natwick, who created Betty Boop, and Jerry Chinicki, who was like one of the senior animators on Yosemite Sam. And so he had a lot of A-list character animators, outside of Disney, and then a lot of like younger, proteges and so on. So we learned so much on that film, that we're able to use later. And one of the things I learned too, just working on later musicals, was basically how to stage and all, for a musical, because when musicals are actually like the musical numbers are actually some of the hardest things to stage and storyboard, because when you go to see a musical like Hamilton, You're like, okay, I paid my $100 or whatever. I paid all this money. I'm sitting in this seat. Lin-Manuel Miranda is standing there on stage going, "Oh, my shot," and okay, so I'm going to watch this whole play. But people just stand there and sing, and it's like, okay. But when you see that on film, that's death. It's like you can't just stand there. You got to do something. And the great thing is later, working on Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, was Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, who wrote the music for it. Ashman, who had also wrote Little Shop of Horrors. He did a great job of working the plot lines into the songs. So the characters are still advancing the plot even while they're singing. So like the opening number of Beauty and the Beast, there goes the baker with his bread like always, to sell. He lays out the whole plot. He's like, I'm Belle. I live in this town. It's really pretty, but I don't like it. I want to go have adventures, and then I'm Gaston. I like Belle. She doesn't like me. I don't care. I'm going to get her anyway, and it sets up the whole plot. In the song, and I just learned so much from that kind of experience. It's just a shame that Howard died so young of AIDS. Because he certainly had more stuff, more ideas in him.
And he passed right before Beauty and the Beast was finished. If I could,
Yeah,
yeah, I was gonna
yeah,
say he passed like right before it was finished.
yeah. There's a documentary on Disney Prime called Howard, and that the producer of Beauty and the Beast, Don Hahn, did, and it's really a beautiful story. It's very sad, but it's very poignant.
I remember, to me, I've always said, because Ashman's music is amazing. Like that whole period, Little Shop is one of my favorite musicals of all time.
Hmm.
But I've always said, I think, like, because they followed a lot of Ashman's rules on how he did music after he had passed away, even for other movies. I think the opening of Hunchback is like one of the most perfect musical openings to a film ever. Is the opening song Clopan sings of him just explaining the backstory. That's
Hmm.
like the most Broadway song I think Disney's ever done. And then I remembered, and then I found out years later, I was like, oh, it's the guy who made Wicked who wrote that song.
Yeah,
So that,
yeah, yeah, Stephen. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know Stephen pretty well. So,
but
so
it's the same thing with like not Disney, but it's like Prince of Egypt because he did all the music for that, and that's like such Broadway level music for a film like that.
yeah, 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 yeah. I worked on that too. I did all the funny scenes in Prince of Egypt, and there's hardly any funny scenes in Prince of Egypt. So they kept cutting them out.
I assume with Prince of Egypt, was it like the did you animate the Steve Martin Short characters, I would assume, or
No, I did storyboard. I did story work and all, which is like, and again, it's more like planning stuff out and all. But in the Disney DreamWorks kind of style of story, it's not like you just take the script and illustrate it. You're adding lines, you're throwing lines out, you're putting things in. There's always suggesting stuff. And that's part of the fun of designing those films, and again, especially musicals and all. But yeah, I did a lot of Moses at the well of Midian, defeating those brigands. So Zephra, comes over and says, to her sisters, "What are you doing?" "Oh, we're helping the funny man who fell down the well." But yeah, I did a lot of stuff on that before I went over to work on Shrek as well. And but the funny thing with Prince of Egypt was that we had a lot of talent going through, because at the time, like our studio head Jeffrey Kassenberg wanted a lot of star power to help out on a picture. And I remember, like, one day I was like a little bored and all, and uh, uh, you know, um, we're designing the 10 plagues of Egypt. And I had one where Moses gives Pharaoh an old fashioned hot foot, like sticks a little match between his toes and lights it. And that drawing was up when they were showing around Val Kilmer. And our producer came into my office and goes, "Very funny, Sito." Oh, sorry. And another time, Mel Brooks came in to read, and he came in to read for Jethro, Moses' father.
Really? So
Yeah,
they
yeah.
weren't going with Danny Glover originally.
No, they were trying a bunch of people, and also they were looking for the tone of the movie, which is, the reason why you had Martin Short and Steve Martin and Mel Brooks and all is because at one point, they were thinking of going funnier, and then it really became. It said, well, the humor really isn't good for this kind of story. We really have to go more towards more serious, and so we were kind of finding the tone of the film as we were going along.
Were
So they did.
they were they doing El Dorado like at the same time, or was that not in production yet?
Not yet. Not yet. They started El Dorado sort of like the last year of Prince of Egypt.
Okay.
These things take a couple of years each. And one time they brought in Patrick McGowan, who had just finished doing the Evil King in Braveheart.
Yeah.
Longshank, and he came in, and and he was funny because I think he came in to read for Pharaoh, and they wound up using Patrick Stewart, but I remember Patrick McGowan said, "I had the telly on the other day, and they were showing Charlton Heston's The Ten Commandments. Now there's a cartoon." And the story I was going to say with Mel Brooks too was the great thing was that it's funny because sometimes when you work with comic actors, when they're not on camera, they're like a little sort of sullen and a little cold and a little withdrawn because they have to be so ebullient on camera, that privately it's kind of like, don't expect me to dance for you. It's just kind of like a little like withdrawn. But Mel was funny. He was goofing around and joking with everybody. Because I mean he's already rich and he's in his 80s and a legend, and he doesn't have to prove anything. And so he's much more relaxed about the whole affair. But so we were taking him through all the storyboards of the movie. And Mel goes, you got to be really careful here, careful, because with all this religion and religious stuff, you can offend a lot of people. You want a joke? I'll give you a joke. I said, yeah, go. Okay, give me a joke. He goes, all the Hebrews, they're walking through the Red Sea, and they got all this stuff on their backs, and they're marching around. And then you cut to a toddler, and there's a toddler that's kind of, like walking around. And then you cut to his mother, and his mother goes, Jesus Christ, come on. I said, I'll pitch that to Spielberg. I don't think it'll go, but I like it. And I did tell Spielberg.
There was the Robin Williams bit where I remember he talked about like the conception of Jesus, and like Mary telling her husband about the conception, and he just goes, Jesus Christ, what a great name, Joe.
Yeah, and it's funny, because I did tell Spielberg that story, and he had a good loud laugh, and he goes, I don't know, I'll wait for Mel to do his version of this. So,
well, I was curious because you did work on Shrek, and I was wondering, I assume, did you work on it when Chris Farley was still attached to it?
Yes.
Okay. How much of it did you work on before they like retooled the film when Farley passed away?
Yeah. Shrek went through a bunch of. I mean, Shrek was in development for like 6 years, and it went through like a dozen rewrites and several directors, and like like you said, like Chris died, and he had only recorded like 5 minutes of dialogue.
Really? I had always heard he had recorded like more than half the film.
No. I think it was only like 5 minutes.
Really?
I mean, he might have had a long session, but that doesn't mean they were going to use everything. And then again, and then the rewrites. When it had, I mean, and rewrites happen in every film. I mean, when we were doing when we were doing Beauty and the Beast, Belle had a little sister named Clarice. She had Maurice was married. She had a stepmom. All kind of. She had a cat. It's kind of, and just all these characters just kind of dropped off as being, unnecessary. In Aladdin, Aladdin had parents at
Yeah, I
one
knew he
point.
had a mom. Yeah, because there, I know there
Yeah,
was like a whole song they recorded about the mom.
yeah, is the whole thing. But after a while, it seemed like everything Aladdin was doing was trying to please his mother and father. And instead of like, the normal kind of hero mission thing. So that's normal. I mean, Frozen was in development for many years and all because it was originally the Snow Queen.
I was gonna say, didn't was it that was originally didn't Walt want to do that like in the
Yeah.
50s?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. This these things are in development for a while. And when you read the original Snow Queen, the Hans Christian Andersen, um, the Snow Queen is just evil. She has she has no motivation or relationship with anybody. She's just up on the mountain being evil, and Elsa and her brother and everything have to go defeat her. And there's treatment after treatment. Everybody did a writing pass on it, and it wasn't until they came up with the idea that Elsa and what's her name, I
Anna.
forgot her name. Anna, yeah, were sisters. That's when they've said, okay, now we got something. This is interesting. you know, and then the writing team, the husband and wife writing team of the music who did the, Let It Go and everything like that. They wrote some beautiful songs. So you go, okay, there's something here. But Shrek went through a bunch of because if you look at the original children's book, it's just like about a little 10-page children's book with basically a one-note joke. Like Casper the Friendly Ghost was eek a ghost, and Shrek was eek he's ugly, an ogre. And we got to make a 90-minute movie out of this. So it took some time to find itself.
Well, and I was curious because I guess back on the discussion of Richard Williams because you worked on Raggedy Ann and Andy.
Hmm.
I guess what was the process like? Because normally Richard Williams's films would I forget what the term animated on twos. I forget what the term was.
On ones, on
On
ones.
ones.
Yeah,
Williams would normally animate at a much higher frame rate or more
yeah.
frames than average film. And I guess was that difficult having to do something like that for a movie like with that high quality of animation?
Oh yeah. I mean, Dick never pushed people harder than he pushed himself, and he pushed himself very hard. So you wanted to keep up with him. He was the perfect like what they would call a GI general. You lead from the front. Or what was the one of Alexander the Great saying to some of his mutinous soldiers, "You strip your shirt, I'll strip mine, and we'll compare scars." Like I got just as many as you. Like, yeah, you're right. So I mean, Dick on every film would try to increase the quality of the project and all, and some cases it worked, some cases it didn't. But like with on Raggedy Ann and Andy, like we had to like, animate and paint a character who has a shirt that's plaid. You know,
Oh God.
that's so hard. That's so hard. I mean, now it's all digital. You just digital map the shirt. But back then, it was like super, super hard. I mean, really, you didn't see digital mapping till Aladdin, the carpet. Like the carpet had a Persian, pattern on it, while you just animated the character. And but Dick was always trying to push the envelope of like, how good can we make it? And he was exciting that way. Like he was very inspirational.
I was curious because Thief and the Cobbler was
Hmm.
like his big passion project. Worked on that for decades. Did you ever work on Thief and the Cobbler? out of
I
curiosity?
yeah, I did just. I mean, I was friends with Dick, and because Dick liked to rap history with me and stuff, so like we would all chit chat together. But I did a little bit of a story consultation on the Death Machine at the end, but I didn't really actually work on it. Right around the time he was offering me that, I was also getting the offer to go back to Hollywood and do Little Mermaid. And and I said to Dick, I said, I never worked at Disney's on the lot yet. And he said, yeah, I'd probably say to do that too. So he understood.
And would that have been because Roger Rabbit was 88, I
88.
believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, back in LA, they were just finishing Oliver and Company and starting Little Mermaid. So
And where did Roger Rabbit fall into all of that? Because I know Roger Rabbit wasn't it like a bunch of the major studios were like helping make that, weren't they?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole pitch, the whole reason Roger was created and all was that Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg were friends, personal friends, and Steven had really good influence on Warner Brothers at the time because he had helped them revive their animation end with like Tiny Toons and things like that. He produced those, and he was also producing stuff with Bluth like American Tail and all. Um, and Jeffrey was of course was in charge of Disney. So the pitch was, let's get Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny face to face. And that was like a great selling point. And then we could bring in other characters and stuff. Like they brought in Betty Boop and they brought in Droopy, from MGM and all. Betty Boop was originally a Paramount property. I think the only characters they couldn't get was they couldn't get Tom and Jerry because they didn't want to the company that had the rights didn't want to give it away. They said, "Well, you're just trying to make money off our characters." And
Which is
like,
funny because
no,
I know there was like a storyboard that was found a few years ago that actually had Tom and Jerry, like early
yeah,
rough storyboard, something like
yeah,
that.
hmm yeah, 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 because if they just couldn't close the deal. This was before Turner, because Ted Turner bought all those properties, and then when he merged into Warner Brothers, it all became Warner Brothers stuff now. So the rights to all these intellectual properties is so dizzying. To say who owns this now.
I was gonna say, well, now it's gotten even worse than I think it was 40 years ago because now it's like this company, but this company owns this company, and now you have to go through these channels and talk to these people. Now, I remember when that Rescue Rangers movie came out a couple years ago on Disney Plus. I don't know how they got the rights to half of that stuff in that movie because the most of it's not even Disney stuff. Like,
Yeah, 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 and on Roger it was fun that yeah, we also had Woody Woodpecker, which was a Universal product, and Walter and Gracie Lance was still alive and everything. So we would get we didn't have emails then. We had faxes. So we would get a fax from Gracie Land saying, like, be sure only to use the 1947 Dick Lundy, Woody design, and not the pre-1945 Seamus Culhane design because it's different. It's like,
oh, the one
yes,
the one where he
yes,
had
fine.
like the one where he had like the goofy teeth and he had like the more like the more fat legs. That was like
Yeah,
the Mel
yeah,
Blanc
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. The bigger feet. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I've never been a big fan of like the very early Woody, like the Mel Blanc Woody, weirdly enough, and it's a very petty reason as to why. It's every time I hear Mel's Woody, I just hear Daffy without a lisp, and that's really distracting to me every time I hear it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was it like Danny Webb. I really liked his, though I think he only did it for like 3 shorts. And
Hmm.
who what it was Walter Lance's wife like that did it.
Yeah, Gracie did the
Yeah,
voice.
I was gonna say I loved her. I think she was great in that role.
Yeah, yeah. But it was a lot of fun doing the old characters too, because it's like when you work with a design like that, any kind of those old designs, you feel like you're a parking lot attendant, valet, and you get a Porsche. You know, you get in and it just handles well. You go, yeah, I like this. Yeah.
Well, I have,
But
with the amount of characters that appear in that movie, was it kind of like a did people get assigned as to like what characters or what scenes usually, or did people have free reign of like, oh, I want to animate this ending bit with Woody at the end of the movie. I want to animate this character. Like,
yeah. Actually, I did that scene. So, yeah, I think some of the artists were specialists with Roger. Two or three were specialists with Jessica and everything. Because Jessica had to be handled just right. And was it when I first came on the project? I didn't come on in the beginning. I came in like sort of midway through, and I said to and Dick says, so what do you want to work on? I said, well, what does nobody want to do? Because nobody likes doing weasels. I said, okay, I'll do the weasels. So I wound up doing a lot of the weasel stuff. And it's interesting, when you look at the weasel characters, there's a character that's like crazy, like in a straitjacket, and I forgot his name, but
I think he's literally just called Crazy. Or
yeah, I
like
think it's crazy.
it might be
Yeah.
Wacky Weasel, something like that. I think his name is
Something like that. Yeah. Well, anyway, June Foray did the voice.
Yeah.
The voice of Rocky the Flying Squirrel. They just sped her up a little bit. Which was fun. But at the ending, like I did the last shot in the movie, which was like all the cartoons, all the tunes dancing. Smile, darn you, smile. And the chorus singing "Smile, darn you, smile" is all of us. It's all the
Yeah.
animators. They recorded us doing the whole thing, and Bob Zemeckis' instructions to us as a director was he says, I want this to look like the last shot of the birds, Hitchcock's Birds, except with tunes. I want tunes everywhere, just fill up the screen. I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And the interesting thing about the ending too is that um, all the characters are all dancing off. And I think James Baxter animated Roger and Jessica walking off. I did all the characters all around. And then when Porky Pig comes in, that's Andreas Deja. He did that one. And when the character says, "That's all, folks," at one point, everything on the production was a balance between the characters. So Warner Brothers stuff versus Disney stuff versus the other characters. And somebody at Disney complained, why are we ending our movie with a Warner Brothers character? Why? The one that said, "That's all, folks." And he says, we're paying for this movie. So what they did is that they actually went to the morgue at the studio, and they brought out the original animation of Tinkerbell from the TV show, where Tinkerbell used to fly in and tap the screen, and
Oh,
then
from
all the
Wonderful
sparkles.
World.
Yeah, from Wonderful World of Disney. Yeah, so they just lifted that animation and just stuck it. It looks great. It's like nobody complained. It's fine.
I was curious because you also worked on Looney Tunes Back in Action, which is that's a big comfort movie of mine. I love that movie.
Okay.
I was curious, what was the process working on that versus working on Roger Rabbit, since it's a very similar kind of film.
Yeah. Well, and there was a lot of years in between. I mean, Roger was like 1987, and Looney Tunes was 2003. So a lot of stuff had happened. Digital registration was a lot easier than it is than it was in 1987. I mean, a lot of the retakes we had to do was what they call registration, which is like the animation has to match perfectly to the live action, or else the character looks like they're floating. Like they don't look like they're in the same world. Zemeckis would say to us, he goes, "Look, we're not making a cereal commercial here. You got to believe the rabbit is sitting on the chair next to Hoskins, or else let's not make this movie." We had to work very hard to get that perfect match between the live action and the animation. There's also a lot of stuff to do with shadowing, shadows and all, because it's the way the characters are lit. At any one time in a live action movie, you'll have like two or three lights on you. You'll get direct light, you'll get reflective light, different types of shadows. Um, on Mary Poppins, when they did the animation, they kind of like filmed the human beings. They threw a lot of light on them to basically get rid of the shadows on the live action people, so they could match to the cartoon characters that were flat. On Roger Rabbit, yeah, we had a whole set of effects teams, wonderful guys and ladies who were doing half-tone shadows, quarter-tone shadows, and what we call rim lights. It was like the hot spots, a little shine on your forehead or something. And cast shadows on the ground.
I know
So
that there's like I think the term like bump the lamp or bump the light came from that movie because there's
yeah,
the bit where he like the light swings back and forth when they're at the bar or whatever, and it keeps. I can't imagine how much of a nightmare animating that must have been.
yeah. The amazing thing about that movie is that the scenes that you don't really notice are like the hardest scenes to do.
Oh, I've heard the story of when Eddie's telling the story about what happened to his brother in the theater and Roger's listening to him. It's a slow zoom in on Hoskins, but Roger's animated that whole time.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like
yeah.
a solid like 15-second, 20-second zoom in on Hoskins while he's like Roger's still animated off to the side the entire time.
Yeah, it's like the old was it the famous playwright Anton Chekhov said the hardest thing to do on stage is nothing. It's, it's true. It's like as long as there's violent action, characters are fighting or jumping or smashing through walls or something. That's great. But a character standing still in character, that's like really hard. you know? And some of the simplest, some of the scenes that seem simple, like right after Arcade Maroon is shot, and Hoskins is in the office, Eddie Valiant, and he goes over to the window and looks through the Venetian blinds, and his POV, you could see Jessica Rabbit running down an alleyway, throwing off three shadows, in these long shadows, in the darkness, and you got to remember, like that character doesn't exist. It's being drawn, and all those shadows are being drawn. And it was so hard to do, but when you see it in the film, you don't notice it, because it works. If it didn't work, then you would notice, so.
I think that's the thing with like Looney Tunes Back in Action and Roger and movies like that, where I think Roger especially, it's a movie where they're not real, but you also don't process how hard it must have been to make a film like that. Like it's like they're not real, but they interact with everything in such a way, and it's the combination of the prop team and the effects team and the animators. It's like I remember watching the scene with the weasels like a few months ago. I was watching when they go into Eddie's house. I never even thought about those are real guns. Those are real prop guns that they're holding. Like they didn't even need to do that. They could have just had them hold 2D like cartoon guns.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's like digital wasn't good enough yet to create a credible 3D gun that would look like real. Like now you can, but back then you had to use real guns. And the scene of the Ink and Paint Club, what they did was the waiters. The little penguin waiters are running around with trays with drinks and glasses and plates and things like that. And all the plates and glasses and drinks are real. What they did was they built the entire club 12 feet off the ground.
yeah, they Muppet styled it. They just built like
Yeah.
holes. Yeah.
Yeah, they had the people from Muppets with these long dowels.
Oh,
With
really? So
with a tray on the end of it.
I didn't know they were actual like Muppet performers doing that.
Yeah, no, they're actual Muppet people. So we had swapped a lot of stories about Jim Henson and stuff. So, which is great. For people who do this for a living, it was heaven. Because it was fun. Because when you went through the '80s, there was so much. there was so much like angry parental groups and people saying, people are always going like, "Oh, you're trying to rot children's minds" and all this kind of stuff, and you're not allowed to do anything. It's like the old cartoons characters are giving each other dynamite and hitting each other with mallets and pushing each other off cliffs, and yet we didn't grow up warped. I don't think. No. but it was fun. Children can disconnect. Characters that are doing cartoon things. As opposed to real people doing things. And I mean, I'm squeamish about horror movies and splatter movies and stuff. But watching cartoon characters hit each other with frying pans, that's okay. And it's funny because. Um, all through the 80s, we had to be very protective of stuff. Um, then we got the script for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and as the characters are blowing each other up and setting each other on fire and hitting each other with frying pans, and I remember going to Zemeckis after reading the script and going, "Are we really going to do this?" And he almost looked a little offended. He's like, "Of course we are." I go, great, like, far out.
I
I just wasn't
remember
expecting it.
I remember even my grandmother. I was watching like some old Sylvester Tweety shorts with her like a decade ago, and I distinctly have this memory of like me and my mom and her watching this, and even my grandmother went, "See, back then cartoons were also really violent." Like,
Yeah, yeah. We were actually like joking around about collecting clips of like the most violent things we could think of, and I think there was a Herman and Catnip from Paramount cartoons where I think it was a Herman the mouse stuffs catnip into a hand crank meat grinder. And he's coming out as like hamburger from the other side.
I know there's like a YouTube compilation. I think it's really called the Looney Tunes Suicide Compilation, and it's just every character like shooting themselves in the head or like
Yeah.
it's mostly just like characters shooting themselves in the head. I think my
Yes.
favorite, I forget, I don't even know what short it is, but it's probably one of my favorite Looney Tunes gags is this little shot of a frog. And it just says, here's footage of a frog croaking, and he pulls out a gun and shoots himself in the head.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a character. Now I've seen everything. It's not a gun. It's so bizarre.
Well, it's like I've always heard the saying of I've seen a lot of behind the scenes footage of people who've worked in television and film and animation, and they've always said like a lot of the time we're just making stuff for us. We're not
Yeah.
necessarily making stuff for children, because you go back to old Looney Tunes stuff. There's some pretty racy stuff in old Looney
Oh
Tunes
yeah.
cartoons. I'm not even talking about the offensive things. I'm just talking even scantily clad women characters.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
in the 80s and 90s, there's character. I can think of like Powerpuff Girls. There's Miss Bellum in Powerpuff Girls. There's Shell and El Dorado. There's very scantily clad women in things meant for children, or there's more
Yeah.
racy jokes and things meant for children. Animaniacs, oh my god, the amount of things in that aren't for children.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's yeah, it's an endless battle and everything with standards and practices in all kinds of things that you can do, you can't do, whatever, we had a thing during Prince of Egypt that when they go through the Red Sea and then Pharaoh's army comes in, and then the Red Sea closes and drowns
Yeah.
Pharaoh's army, and it leaves Pharaoh on the shore yelling Moses like that. One of the producers came over and said, "We got a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" "The horses. We can't show the horses drowning."
Are you serious?
Yeah, and I said, they're cartoons. They're cartoon horses. They're not real horses. It's
Did
like,
they throw a fit over the River of Blood? I'm curious. Did
no,
they
that was okay.
really? They were fine with the
Yeah,
Nile blood, but they weren't fine
yeah.
with the horses drowning.
Don't hurt the horses. Yeah. So if you look at Pharaoh when he's crawling back up on the rock, from the storm, you could see like two horses in the background galloping out of the surf safely. Oh
Well,
God.
one horse survived.
Yeah, see, there you go.
That's like I remember the Gravity Falls. I remember Alex Hirsch had this great story. He posted like a whole video of like emails he got from Standards and Practices, and it's so funny of just the things that they got upset about. But I remember there was like like a Halloween episode they did at Gravity Falls where they were gonna have a little pamphlet that said Halloween party, spin the bottle, and Standards and Practices fucking hated spin the bottle being on that piece of paper.
Oh,
And they were like, no, spin the bottle means kissing and this and this. And Alex was like, what do you think teens are going to do at a Halloween party? Like,
yeah,
what do you think they're going to do? And he said like, oh, I went through like old Disney Channel episodes. I'm like, there has to be an episode where somebody played spin the bottle in a Disney Channel show. Like,
yeah.
and they kept fighting him. They didn't want to do it. And then he told them, okay, put not SMP approved on the pamphlet. And Standards and Practices were like, nobody's going to get that joke. And he was like, okay, cool. But is it against Standards and Practices if we put that on the Halloween party? And he just got an email back saying, not SMP approved has been approved by SMP.
Yeah, yeah. This stuff, and it's funny. Yeah, also because like the things that were considered, verboten, whatever, in the '60s, whatever, like are okay now, and it's just sort of the the endlessly shifting scale of like what's tasteful or what's not tasteful. A lot of times, like we used to find collections of fan art.
What kind of fan art?
Yeah, weird, bizarre kind of stuff.
What
like,
kind of fan art?
yeah, yeah. Oh, well, one of my favorite letters was that we got a cranky letter once on Little Mermaid from a Washington State nudist colony. It's like, it's got to be pretty cold up there. I don't know. It's going to be running around, but they objected to Ariel's clamshells.
Really?
Yes, they said they're restrictive, sexist, hinted S&M, and she can't check herself for breast cancer. Isn't that great? I love that. I love it. I said we got to frame this. This is like really good.
I remember there was a video I watched once of a guy who was like reviewing Aladdin, and I think he made a joke during like the Prince Ali scene where he had said it was like, all right, we got the 50 peacocks, the 500 camels, the people with gold, the women the animators clearly had too much fun drawing.
Yeah, it's all that kind of stuff, and one of the things that always made me laugh was that when people send letters of art or something like that, and they do sort of risque stuff with the characters. You would figure when you were thinking of like sexy characters, you think, okay, the Little Mermaid or Jasmine or something like that. A lot of times we used to get fan art of the mom from The Incredibles.
Oh, let me tell you right now, that character has a very big following online. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's fully clothed. She's like,
I've always said it's because of that one shot in the movie where she looks at her butt in the mirror. That's the one shot I think everybody points to in the movie. Well, it's like Shell from El Dorado. That's another one I know a lot of people really. I know there's a story with when Lola Bunny was created for Space Jam. One of the character designers did this jokingly like lewd piece of like her shirt not like fully covering her boobs, like under her shirt's like too high basically. And he drew it as a joke, and it accidentally got lumped into official things that were being sent off to be approved. And I think he has it framed like in his house or something like that. It says like, shirt is way too high, boobs are exposed, like this and this, and it somehow got like lumped in with the official stuff when they were sending it off. Like,
yeah, we actually have I have a memo that I saved from Aladdin that says the genie has a navel.
The genie was the problem. No,
Yeah, 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 yeah. Because in the second song, the Prince Ali song, the Prince Ali, wonder is he Ali Ababa? He's the genie is like acting like a drum major, of leading the parade. For that scene, he has to look like a human being, not like the
right.
genie. Not the genie. And so he's got a jacket, but with no shirt to the waist. And there was a whole debate about whether or not he would have a navel. So he said,
See,
okay, he's got a navel.
I
So
hear that and I find that so weird because I'm like, all the women in that movie are like barely wearing anything, like
yeah,
the entire movie. But they
yeah.
had a problem with him having a belly button.
Belly button. Yeah, yeah,
That's so weird to me because, like, again, like 90% of the women in that movie are like barely wearing anything.
yeah, yeah. But that's the thing is that all this kind of censorship stuff is just and it's funny. It's funny too because you travel in other countries. Like right around the time we were having all these arguments and stuff, I was at a film festival in France, and I was sitting in a subway station in Paris, by the Champs-Élysées, and there was a new hit movie about a political sex scandal called Enfant Public, and the poster was basically a huge portrayal of a nude woman
Oh my
from from
god.
from neck to crotch. And it's just like it's just staring you right in the face while you're sitting at a subway platform, going, "Well, they don't have any problem with this." So with somebody's belly button. So
Well, I guess something I was curious about. You had a stint in the, I guess for a change of subject, you had a stint in the '80s working at Filmation,
yeah,
like working on things like He-Man and Fat Albert and that Pinocchio movie they ended up making.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
I guess what was that process like? Because Filmation, well, I guess television animation is normally somewhat different to film animation, but Filmation had like a very distinct style, and they were normally more low budget comparative to some other shows. So I guess what was the process like working at Filmation?
Well, at Filmation, yeah, I mean the shows doing TV, animation. Generally, it's much more dialogue heavy, and it's much more about scripting and all, and because well, in theatrical animation, it comes out of the tradition of like pantomime. Characters who do, like Donald Duck with a plumber's helper stuck on his butt is good for like 2 minutes of good pantomime animation. Very expensive though, but it's beautiful when it's done. But television can't afford that kind of stuff. So yeah, so we would reuse a lot of stuff. So you had stock runs and stock walks, and the character, doing the transition to He-Man was good for some footage. And so when you're doing the storyboards, you were told you had to have like at least 35% reuse in every show, if at all possible. And it there was a certain challenge to it, but it was kind of fun also to do that stuff. And and again too, like they're very sensitive to parents groups and stuff. So you notice like He-Man has the sword. He never stabs anybody with it.
Well, yeah, it's like the Ninja Turtles thing. They all have weapons, but they never like stab anybody or
Yeah, they
like.
never used them or anything. Yeah, yeah. Like He-Man will pick up Beast Man and throw him 2 miles, and he always lands in uh, a pile of hay or a mud puddle or
Unless
something.
it's a robot, then you can cut its body in half and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And again too, where we would get fan mail, from fans, and the fans had the most violent stuff. It's always He-Man sawing off Skeletor's head and spitting down the hole, and like disgusting things. So that's our fan base out there. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, because there was that period. Because in the early '80s, there was a recession, and there was a strike here, and the production was very low at the time, and the Disney revival hadn't really started yet, and also so Filmation was sweet, it was steady work. You got to do a lot of stuff. I mean, I was joking with Lou Scheimer. the head of Filmation, and I said, He-Man bought my first house. And Lou looked at me and he goes, "Me, Archie's." Sugar, sugar, da 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 da. Honey, honey.
Well, and
Yeah.
did you work on all of He-Man, or did you work on like a majority of He-Man?
Yeah, yeah. I worked on the first two seasons and all that were done, and the first two seasons of She-Ra. And then also did Brave Star and Fat Albert. So
Well, I guess what was it? I guess did you like because they did that Pinocchio film also in
yeah,
the '80s, which
yeah.
is probably a much more obscure movie. And I guess what was the process like getting like was it different when Filmation made a film comparative to a TV show, or was it about the same?
Yeah, I think the hard part is that yeah, it was knowing how to design for that. Plus the thing with Filmation too is that it would pick up a lot of crew that were laid off from other studios. So when Secret of Nim or something laid off, or the Black Cauldron laid off, we picked up a lot of artists. From those other productions. And they brought their theatrical experience with them.
And I was curious because did you have another thing to say?
No, no, I was just going to say it's just that yeah, yeah, it's knowing how to design for these things. Like we had one supervisor who had a scene of Pinocchio walking down a flight of stairs, and I said, for the amount of animation you have to do to make it carry. Oh, and it's on an angle, so you can't reuse the cycle. You have to animate it because it's perspective. And I said, it has an entertainment value of zip. It's like he doesn't fall down, he doesn't fall down the stairs. He doesn't slide down the banister. He doesn't dance down the stairs like Jimmy Cagney in Yankee Doodle Dandy. He just comes down the stairs. And I go, that's boring. The amount of work you got to do.
Well, if I recall, they got in didn't they get in like legal trouble for that? Because I think it was like they were kind of trying to make pseudo sequels to Disney movies. Because wasn't that kind of what that Pinocchio movie was supposed to
Oh
be?
yeah.
Like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
technically,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. And then a Snow White movie after that.
yeah.
And I mean, the original fairy tales were in public domain, but the Disney legal department can still make your life miserable. There's a lot, a lot of these kind of things and all. You really have to get clearance from the various legal divisions and all, because it's close enough that that a studio can sue you. And the thing with Disney is that they don't need to win; they could just keep you in court.
Yep.
They've got the resources. They had a long lawsuit against the estate of A. Milne for Winnie the Pooh, for a long time.
Well, yeah,
So
I know they didn't start using them again until like really recently. I think it was like 2015. I think like not long after that Winnie the Pooh movie came out in like 2011. I think they like were dragging that out more, and I think they just didn't use those characters for like years up
yeah,
until like recently.
yeah. I remember at one point. I mean, I had already moved on to other studios, but friends at Disney would say, "Yeah, we had this big meeting with Michael Eisner, and he goes, next year everything's going to be about Pooh. We're going to have Pooh on everything, Pooh all over the place." Okay.
I guess something I was fascinated about, because you had there's these two movies you did in the '80s that I guess I would say are probably like some of the most cult '80s cult films I could think of in terms of animation. Was Rock and Rule
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
Star Chaser, which I'd say Star Chaser maybe a little less than Rock and
yeah,
Rule as a cult
yeah,
movie,
yeah,
but I guess because Rock and Rule was Nelvana, if I remember
yeah,
correctly.
yeah.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
were you working in Canada, or were they hiring out at the
No,
time?
I was in Canada. I moved to Toronto for 3 years to work on it. So, back in those days, you went where the work was. It's like following the reindeer herds. There was a lot of there was a period there where artists just went where there was an interesting project. So like the director of Lion King for a while was working in Japan on the Little Nemo movie, and
Oh, I know
I
that movie had a nightmare production.
yeah, that's another one of those ones with just a lot of crazy starts and stops and things, and it's just people were going just where there was something interesting to work on, and yeah, and Rock and Roll was just a very interesting project, I mean, and like I said, in New York at the time, it was like Sesame Street and and an occasional commercial. And it's like here, okay, this is like full animation. I'm like, ooh, okay, so like all you have to do is say full animation, and everybody's like, ooh, I want to work on that. So
Well, Nirvana, and Rock and Roll was like, because Nirvana during that period was like amazing, amazing. Like some of the most amazing looking hand drawn animation from that era, I think, was their television specials they were doing, and this was them with a full film budget with
mhm.
Iggy Pop and other big musicians. And how much work did you end up doing on that movie?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did a certain amount. Like, I didn't work with many of the major characters except for the big monster at the end. I
Okay.
animated a lot of that.
The weird
Yeah,
amalgamation abstract monster that
yeah,
appears at the end of the
yeah,
movie.
yeah, yeah. And I was actually drawing my experience from Raggedy Ann and Andy because I worked on a character called the Greedy on Raggedy Ann,
I was gonna say if it was the
Taffy
same
Pit
kind of
monster.
thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's why like they realized like I'd be the good person to do it. And the Taffy Pit was originally done by a guy named Emery Hawkins, who was an old Warner Brothers animator. And he did he did one of my favorite scenes in there was a Bugs Bunny cartoon called Hillbilly Hare, where
Was
the
that the
where
one with the two twins?
the
Like
two
the
twins, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So Emery animated a lot of the square dance and the square dance was designed by a guy named Ted Pierce, and at the time in the 40s there was like a fascination for square dances and country dances and hay rides and things like that because a lot of LA was still pretty rural. Before 1945, when if you went to the neighborhood that I'm in right now, it was like horse farms, and agricultural and all. So the Western kind of motif was still very strong in LA at the time. So they want them to do a square dance, and Ted Pierce like was from New York and didn't like square dances or country western music, so he deliberately wrote a satirical square dance. Hit him low, hit him high, stick your finger in his eye. That kind of whirl, whirl, twist and twirl, jump around like a flying squirrel. Like all and so he put all this like crazy stuff in the square dance. But to make a long story longer, I came off, working on the Taffy Pit stuff, which was everything was always changing. And so when we did the monster and everything, I said it should be the same thing. You never get a really good look at what the heck it is,
Well, yeah,
and
it's this weird orange glowing abstract thing with like teeth and other stuff. It's very I always described it's almost like an H.R. Geiger ish looking thing.
yeah, it is. It is a lot like that. Yeah, it's true. It's true. And yeah, so I did a bunch of that stuff, and a couple of the yeah, yeah, just a couple of other scenes in and out. I worked on all the TV specials too. Like, well, I did Easter Fever and Take Me Up to the Ball Game, and yeah, interesting would Take Me Up to the Ball Game, but the villain in the piece, whatever, is the old TV actor Phil Silvers, and he plays like a fast talking, kind of like a shyster, and Phil Silvers at the time was retired, living in Monterey, and he was almost legally blind. He had very very bad eyes, and he would sit on his balcony and play his clarinet all day. But when you recorded him, his voice was beautiful. Like the voice was still there. And yeah, I think this is the 70th anniversary today of the Phil Silvers show, Sergeant Bilko.
Oh,
You know,
wow,
so,
that's a weird coincidence.
yeah, not odd. How are
Well,
you? Nice to see you. Like,
Well, and with Star Chaser, I was curious because that wasn't Nelvana, if I remember correctly. That
no.
was that the same team that did Heavy Metal? I
Uh,
had always assumed it was some of the same people who did Heavy Metal.
it might have been, yeah. I mean, in those days, companies would just kind of form themselves and then fall apart just as quickly. So I think it officially the producer was TMS, which was Tokyo Mushishinsha,
Right.
and which was Tokyo based, but they wanted the American animators to be working on this, and so they do the production half in Japan and half here, and all. And there's a fellow named John Sperry was directing the American parts here, and and the whole thing about it being in 3D and all that was another like selling point and all. But yeah, it is funny because you read the script and it sounds like somebody basically took the script of Star Wars and
Somebody
threw
saw
it.
Star Wars and they
Is
were
it-
like,
Write another one.
"How? What's the meme people say online? Hey, can I copy your homework? Okay, but don't make it exactly the same." Like that's what Star Chaser is
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. So like it's one of those ones where it's like it paid the bills for a while. So, but that's the funny thing is that you work on a lot of stuff, and some stuff becomes a huge hit. Some things just die on the vine, and you never know. It's like I never expected the He-Man show to be such a big hit. And all I just felt like I got invited to fan conventions, and people would go, "What was your inspiration when you did episode MU-34 to Castle Hero?" I pay my American Express bill.
Oh, I've had people where they've told me situations like that of like, oh, this character. I've interviewed voice actors where they were just like, oh, this character you played this on this one episode in 1998 of this cartoon, and I was like, I don't remember who you're even talking about. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
not even like an ungrateful thing. It's just like I've done so much stuff. I don't even remember that character I played. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, like I remember back in college, the first time I met Grim Natwick, the designer Betty Boop, was interesting about. I was going to the School of Visual Arts in New York, and I remember, the thing with Grim was that Grim was the Betty Boop specialist, but then at one point Walt Disney hired him away and everything to work on Snow White because Disney was attempting more human characters rather than the pure cartoony ones, and he was worried that he didn't have the crew that could take on realistic people yet. This is like mid 1930s, like
and
1930.
they weren't really rotoscoping, if I recall
No,
correctly.
no,
Yeah,
no. They would film people, but
yeah.
they wouldn't really like today they do motion capture. They would just like take a pose from every 2 or 3 seconds, and work off of that. But but Grimm specialist was young women, and so he came out to work on Snow White, and then Snow White came out and was a huge hit. And Grimm went back to Fleischer to work on Gulliver's Travels and do Princess Glory. So somebody at my college when they were talking said, it's the usual sort of like film school thing, and I teach in film school, so I know. But the usual film school thing is that when you left Disney's and returned to Fleischer's, were you rejecting the sort of stultifying stylization and the rigidity of the Disney system, and you were looking for a more openly ethnic gestalt of the Fleischer company? And Grimm said, "No, they offered me more money."
Say the famous analogy I remember learning in like English class was like sometimes the author's intention is not what people think it is. I think it was like, oh, like the curtain is blue because it represents the depressive era that the story takes place, and the feeling of the main character. The author's perspective was the curtain is fucking blue.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like,
Yeah, it's like when you read about like the making of like A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens just wanted to make money
yeah.
because his previous novel had flopped like I think his two previous novels flopped, and he goes, I got to write something to make money.
If
I'll
I
write
recall,
something
he
interesting.
considered it like trash, basically,
Yeah,
didn't it? Yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
say.
yeah. He banged it out really fast. It was like something like a 2 months or something, and that's the novel he's known for now. So but He-Man was like it's funny because I remember like I just started working on it, and I turned to the guy next to me and said, "Come on, the name of this show is going to be He-Man, right? That's silly attempt. It's going to be like Ragnar or Karnak or something."
Thundar the
Bar.
Barbarian.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
said, "No, it's He-Man." They go, "All right."
That's so
You know,
funny because I remember watching The Toys That Made Us, that docuseries on Netflix. I remember they interviewed the guys who made He-Man, and they
yeah,
were all like, He-Man's an awesome name. Like, all of them were like,
yeah,
that name's awesome. And I just
yeah,
remember, apparently, like, one of the toy sellers was like, no one's going to buy this if this is called He-Man. You have to,
yeah,
like, give it a bigger name than that. So they called it Masters of the Universe.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, there's that. Just like I've never found the proof yet, but I had always heard a story that deep down in the Disney archives, there's a memo left behind by Walt Disney, and because when Walt knew he was dying, he like shot off a lot of memos, about keeping everything running. And he died in 1966. He approved every project up till 1980. But that shows you how far ahead he was thinking. But supposedly he left a memo behind, and it was a list of all the intellectual properties that would make good animated features and all the ones to avoid. And on the top of the don't do list was Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast.
Oh my God. was
Oh,
I was actually curious because you are a historian, an animation
mhm,
historian,
mhm.
and has there ever been a piece like I guess like either a piece of lost media or something that you've learned about where you would just be like, I would love to see that. I would love to see what that is. Like, or what that would have looked like a short film that's like considered lost, or a film that's considered lost. Like, what is it? The Russian Pinocchio film that like never got finished in like the 30s, like that kind of
Oh,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's very good. Yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah. I never looked for it and all, but I know that around the time that Disney was doing Alice in Wonderland, there was an East Coast animator named Lou Bunnin, who did stop motion, and he was doing a stop motion Alice at the same time, and the Disney company kind of like squeezed him out and everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Didn't and it
Like,
came out like years later, didn't it? It was like
yeah,
finished for a
yeah.
bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And one of my teachers was friends with him, and he said, yeah, he was pretty bitter about that. He felt like the giant mouse came and stepped on your toes, sort of thing. So that happens too, all the time. Mm.
I know there's like an infamous like Disney thing where I don't think it's ever been confirmed if it was real.
Mm.
The Mickey Mouse sex tape like that was made
Yeah,
like
yeah,
supposedly in like the 40s. Like,
yeah. No, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've heard stories like that and all. I mean, the stag film that was done for Winsor McCay's retirement called Buried Treasure. And everything, which was like in 1934, Winsor McCay, the great cartoonist, was retiring, and the whole animation business threw a big party for him in New York. And it's like one of those old time soirees where everybody's in tuxedos with cigars and everything, and all just celebrating that, a man they considered one of the people who founded the business. Was really the first great animator. And partly was that a bunch of artists from different studios collaborated on a stag film and everything about this character called Ever Ready Hard On, and 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 his adventures, and the when it came time for Winsor McCay to speak, um, he got up to the podium after all these testimonials, and he looked out at the crowd and said, "I gave you guys an art form, and you turned it into a business. Too bad." And then he sat down. you know and one of my mentors was Seamus Culhane, who was an animator who worked on Snow White and all, and worked for Fleischer. And Seamus was in the room, so he confirmed that. He goes, yes, that really happened. And I go, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's
So
like I remember there was like a short called like Mickey Mouse in Vietnam that was found a couple years ago, and
yeah, I
yeah,
remember.
that
Yeah,
was considered lost for a long time. I know. Like I said earlier, I think one of the ones I was most fascinated about was like the supposed Mickey Mouse sex tape that's like never
yeah.
been confirmed if it was real, but the only person I think that ever talked about it was one of the nine old men.
Yeah. No, I never heard. I mean, I knew like five of the nine element, but I know that like a lot of times people mix that up with there's an illustration of all the Disney characters having sex and stuff that that Wally Wood did for for a Head magazine, like in the 70s. In the early 70s, like, it was all of that stuff was all about being shocking and about being cool and
Yeah,
iconoclastic
that
and
was like
stuff.
the R. Crumb Bakshi
Yeah,
era. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And Wally Wood was such a good artist. He was such a strong
Was he
draftsman.
the one who got sued by Disney?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah, was he
yeah.
the one who got sued and they like argued like fair use or like parody? I forget what it was.
Yeah. That was a parody. Yeah. Well, there was a thing called the Air Pirates, and the Air Pirates were underground cartoonists who did stuff with the Disney characters. Except instead of calling them Mickey Rat or something like that, or Donald Moose or something, they called him Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck.
Yeah.
And so that Disney sued them. I think Wally got in trouble for that one, but he didn't name anything. But you saw the characters are obviously it's Mickey and Minnie and everything. There's Snow White is getting gangbanged by the seven dwarves, and all this stuff is happening. But the thing is, the drawings were so good that everybody assumed it was a rogue Disney animator, like it was a Disney guy who just
A
like
disgruntled
grumbled.
ex-employee kind of thing.
Yeah. But no, it was just Wally. And so Wally was just like that. Was just that good an artist.
Oh,
That
I had always heard like stories with Disney. I think it was like the penis on the Little Mermaid VHS cover. I
oh
had
yeah,
always
well
heard
that's
like
yeah,
which like that I know was confirmed. The artist had just said like I was on a deadline, I hadn't had any
yeah,
sleep, and I just drew
yeah,
this without thinking.
yeah. There's all the people are always reading stuff into. I mean, I mean, my I'm the artist who did the bishop in Little Mermaid trying to marry uh, the two characters
The the
and
the
still think
the
he has a boner.
yeah, the boner.
Yeah. It's his knees.
Yeah.
He's standing on a box.
Well, it's like when somebody tells you that, you can see it, but like everyone, if you just look at it, people would assume it's that. But when somebody says, "Oh, it's his knees," and then you look at it from that perspective, it's like, okay, now I can actually see that that's his knees.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you see plenty of like we call them like little Easter eggs or something in the old movies from the 30s and 40s and everything, and you could just imagine that two artists or technicians in 1937 are saying, "What do you think? 70 years in the future, people are going to have machines and they're going to look at these things single frame. Don't people in the future have anything better to do?"
oh, that's like the woman in the window and Rescuers, like that kind
Yeah,
of
that's
thing.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really happened. Yeah, that's true. And what's funny about it is that the first time rescuers went to video cassette, they edited it out. And when they showed it on Wonderful World of Disney or something, they would edit it out. But what happened around 1991, they went through a new edition of DVDs, and the suits and whatever who organized that didn't bother to ask the artists. I mean, we all knew, like if you told us about it, you say, "Oh yeah, there's the Playboy centerfold and the thing," and everybody knew about that. But the suits don't talk to the artists, so they made like 12 million DVDs and got into a lot of trouble when it came out.
Well, I know it was like there was also the thing with like Jessica Rabbit's dress when she like gets flung from the
Yeah,
car. Like that's another
yeah,
one where like supposedly like oh you could so they drew her anatomically correct down there, and I think that was like never I think it was like confirmed by one of the artists that they didn't do that. It's just because of like the quality of the film. It looked like she was
yeah,
naked or something like that.
yeah. I still think they did. So, and and the other one too is that there's a shot of Betty Boop talking to Eddie Valiant in the Ink and Paint Club, and her top pops down for a minute, and you see a little nipple action, and they put that in just as an homage to Betty because Betty Boop's cartoons had that all the time in a lot of things. And again, they cut it out for the final. When the real turnover that happened was in 1991, I think, and because up to that point, people having videos at home and people recording stuff and freeze framing it and all was still very, very new. So the studio didn't really think about it, and there was a time when they were going to do a thing of oh god, I'm trying to remember the character, but they were doing an Oscar presentation for best animated short, and oh, I think it was the 50th anniversary of Woody Woodpecker, so that would be 1990. And what happens is that Woody pops out of a tree or something, and he has a list, and he's reading from this list about the nominees for best animated short are, and as he's talking, this list is curling over, while he's reading the names, and there's writing on there, and the artist who created that shot put things like Michael Eisner's phone number on it, and if you're looking satanic messages here, go fuck yourself. And the thing with the Oscars is that once it's done, they just run into the recording. They just run into the TV studio, hand it to them. They slap it in, and out it goes to like 2 billion people around the world. Like there's no time to preview this stuff.
Wait, so they like did they speed up the like did the voice actor read that out loud or did they like
No,
okay.
no. He was just reading the normal copy of Best Animated.
Okay, I thought it was like they like sped his voice up so fast you couldn't understand what he was saying or something like
But
that.
no, it was the writing. It was the writing on a piece of paper. Now the thing is, the Oscar telecast was broadcast, on the East Coast. By the time it got to the West Coast, there was already complaints because apparently people had taped it, ran it back, freeze framed it, looked at it upside down, got offended, and started to call ABC with complaints. And that's when at the studio we were like, oh God, they're really paying attention. They're looking at every damn frame. Like, and
Oh
that's
well,
when they got real serious about editing. So
as a kid, I used to I never I used to like frame by frame cartoons, not for malicious reasons, but like there were parts of movies where I would really like how something was animated, and on my VHS player, I would like hit pause, 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 and I would literally just watch the scene frame by frame. It was like there's like bits in Friend Like Me and Aladdin. There would be bits I would like frame by frame, and I'd just watch how it was animated. Like I would just keep pausing and pausing it and watch how it was animated.
yeah. Oh yeah, you learn a lot. You learn a lot from all that stuff. Bob Clampett used to tell this great story about he did this cartoon once. Well, what the studios used to do in the 40s, because they had a board of censors. They had a studio censor that would look at everything, standards and practices, and they would do what's called gimmies. And a gimme was you put a deliberate swear or something deliberately provocative,
Yeah.
have to crack up your friends, but then the studio censor would take it out and say, okay, that has to come out, and then the censor could go back to his boss and say, oh, I have a scalp, like I did this, and didn't really hurt your film. So they would put these things. That's the ones where like Porky Pig he hits his
Is that
thumb
the
with
son of a bitch? Yeah.
yeah, that one. Son of a baby. Yeah, that one. So Clampett used to love to tell a story about there was a there was a short about a little flea who was like a hobo, and
Oh
he
yeah, 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 yeah. I know that
will
one.
be food around the corner, food around the corner, food around the corner for me, like this, and he finds this dog to that he could jump into his fur and be chewing on his butt and stuff, and doing what fleas do, and at the end of the cartoon the dog goes crazy with itching and everything, and he's howling and he's rubbing his ass along the ground of the carpet, and he's running around the living room, and he takes a fireplace shovel, like one of those metal shovels from a fireplace, and starts whacking himself on the ass. And he's going, ooh, bang, 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 ooh, bang, 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 bang. And at one time, he looks right at camera and goes, hey, I better stop this. I'm starting to like it. And Clampett said for some reason the censor didn't catch it. Like he was distracted or he was reading a
Oh,
memo.
I remember the guys who made Animaniacs talked about how there was always this like thing that supposed rumor that you would put in a dirty joke, the censor would catch it, so they wouldn't pay attention to an even dirtier joke you would put right after it.
Yeah.
And I remember Tom Ruger in an interview confirmed, yeah, no, we did that. We would intentionally like put a dirty joke in, and then we would basically see if we could get away with it, like
Yeah.
just see, like what we could get away with.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, it's fun. Yeah, and the thing is, there's no perfidious, plot or something to rot the minds of the youths of America. It's people just having fun. That's when you go, hey, it's just a cartoon. Don't worry. you know, kids will grow up normal. It won't affect them.
But I was curious about there was one credit I saw that I was curious about was Osmosis Jones.
Oh yeah.
And it said you were animation director when I
Yeah.
looked into it. And
Hmm.
I know that film had a very kerfuffled production from what I know.
Yeah.
And I guess what was the process working? Because I Osmosis Jones is another movie where I think the animated visual creativity of that movie is amazing. Like even
Oh,
now, how great that movie looks. I
yeah.
guess what was the process of working on that film? Because I've just always heard stories from people who've worked on it saying that whole film was just a nightmare, like with how it was handled or how the behind the scenes worked with that film.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it originally, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was the animation director, and me and my partner Pete Kroon, and we really kind of directed most of the film. We directed like 60 minutes of the film, and the Farrelly's brothers came in kind of late to the process, and they brought in Bill Murray and directed all the live action. And we were originally intending the live action to be like 5 minutes worth,
Yeah, I
and
had always heard the whole movie was meant to be basically animated.
animated, yeah, 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 and it really came. And but the thing is, the Warner Brothers wanted Farrelly's really bad because they had just done something about Mary, and Kingpin, so they were on a hot streak, and they were doing some really like big movies, and so they wanted to get them away from Fox. And all, they gave them this, they gave them to us, and said, Peter and Bobby are going to be like the capos here in charge and all, and they were nice to work with and everything. They didn't really understand animation very well, but they got into it, and they had some funny ideas and all. So, and you know. But again, too, there's always like arguing about censorship and things like that. Like there was one scene where Ozzy and Drix are talking to each other, and Ozzy, I mean Drix, who's David Hyde Pierce, is talking about his educational background. And he says, I graduated magna cum laude from the Lawrence Livermore, laboratories, and all this kind of like stuff about his collegiate stuff time. And then Ozzy goes, "Hey man, I didn't go to no fancy school. My school was crack central." And Drix says, "What, drugs?" And he goes, "No, it was in the crack, right in the
Yeah, yeah, I
fucker's
remember
center."
that bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we get a note from Standards and Practices and goes, "Does he have to say drugs?"
Oh,
It's like, yes, he has to say drugs because it's not funny if he doesn't say it. It's like, it's like he's not telling kids to take drugs. It's the joke. It's like it won't work without that. Like, but we got things like hit with things like that all the time.
If I recall, did that make it into the movie? Because I don't remember him saying the drug line in
No,
the
I think we
movie.
cut it. I think
I
we had
was
to
gonna
cut.
say because I had always felt like there was a piece missing to that
Yeah,
bit because it felt like there
yeah,
was a piece missing to that joke whenever I would see that part.
yeah. Because Chris Rock was very funny. He was very funny at that on that. But the thing too is that there's you know again, there was a whole issue about Roger Rabbit was a PG-13 film, and we knew that. And Warner Brothers decided that Osmosis should be a G film. And to be a G film, it's like this: you can't have anything, nothing in it and everything. While Zemeckis said, "I got to have a PG-13 because I got to get teens." Like he said that he was really worried about being able to get 15 to 25. And there's actually one swear word in all of Roger Rabbit. Do you know
Real,
where it is?
I really,
There's one swear word. Yeah.
really, it feels like there's like more.
No,
Honestly,
no, there's only one. When Roger drinks the whiskey and it explodes like a steam whistle, and he's shooting off all that noise, and Hoskins has a bottle of bourbon, and the bourbon bottle bursts, and then when the noise is finally over, the first thing Hoskins says is, "Son of a bitch,"
does
and his
Baby
wife,
Herman never swear? I swear,
no.
Baby Herman says hell or ass at like one point.
That could be, yeah, it could be like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I always like when he talks about his girlfriend. He goes, "You got the brains of a rattle." So great line. But yeah, but I mean, Zemeckis said that deliberately. He says because we got to. He said, "I'm not worried about kids. I'm going to get kids because it's a cartoon. They're going to want to see the cartoon. I got to, and the parents, are on watching HBO or something." He says, "I got to get 15 to 25." He says, "And they won't go see a cartoon." And he was right and everything. That he had to target that audience just correctly to bring them in. Uh, um, just like I'm trying to think. In Lion King, they still wanted to keep it G because part of the Children's Television Act of 1996 was that, even though it's a little later, was that you can't advertise a PG-13 movie on the cable things like,
On like Disney Channel stuff
yeah,
like
Disney
that.
Channel and Cartoon Network, and kids, kids WB, all that kind of Nickelodeon.
Which is so
So
weird because they played Men in Black and Jurassic Park on Cartoon Network at one point.
wow, wow,
So
yeah,
I don't.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's really no swearing in Jurassic Park. I think it's gruesome as all hell, but you know, but that's the funny thing about it, But I think in Lion King, standards and practices objected to the way Scar and Simba fight at the end when they,
Really?
when they get killed. They thought some of the fighting was too violent, so
Well,
they
I
had
had
to cut
always heard
that too.
because I know Scar's like original death was a lot more
Yeah,
intense because he like I think his original death was he like gets engulfed in flames as opposed to
yeah,
like getting eaten by the hyenas, and I'd heard that they didn't go with that because they thought that was too gruesome. Like,
yeah. That could be. That could be. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know better than I do. That's what.
well, Osmosis Jones to me, I don't know how that didn't get a PG-13, honestly, because
Yeah,
that's I was I saw that when I was 5,
yeah,
and I remember I rewatched it like a few years ago after not seeing it in years. There is some really like violent stuff in that movie for a PG, like
yeah,
especially
yeah,
during that era. Because I always remember uh, the bit where Thrax kills that guy in the hot tub or like the steam
yeah.
room or wherever. He like cuts him like down the middle.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. And we had a huge fight with standards in practice when I have the gangster say, "What are you, a sissy Mary?" And it's like I'm not saying fag or I'm not saying something really blatantly offensive like that. A sissy Mary. It's just like it's an old time term from the 50s, that I remember. That my mother used to use that term. Just like and there was a huge argument. It said it's not derogatory to any one group or anything like that, except sissies. So but that's the kind of stuff we argue about and all. And I had we had a whole scene in a place called Gonad's Gym instead of Gold's Gym.
I knew that I know that that's apparently a scene that's like never been released. Was it mostly finished or rough animated?
No, no, it was just a rough idea, so rough storyboards and all. So,
Okay, yeah, because I
but
had always heard there was a rumor that that was like a kind of finished scene that's like never been
yeah,
released or
no,
something.
I wish you would. Yeah, yeah. And the only thing that survived from that I liked was at one point the characters are walking through the I think the office of the mayor, and there's a statue of the sperm,
The sperm.
our founder. Yeah,
Oh no,
that's
that's one of my favorite jokes of the whole movie is that little
oh good. That's
gag.
my joke. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, every once in a while you get a line in. Once in a while you get something that what somebody said or something. But and I think in Aladdin, I'm the one that like after Jafar gets the genie's powers and gets sucked down back down into the lamp, and Aladdin says, "Phenomenal cosmic powers, itty bitty living space,"
Yeah.
like repeating it, and that's a suggestion I made, and it went in the movie, and I said, "Ooh, okay," but those are kind of fun, like because I think a really good production is open to input. A good director, if he senses something that's interesting, he'll say, "Oh, stick that in." Like we had a big argument, not argument, but a big discussion and story that when Pumbaa and Timon and Simba come back to Pride Rock, and Simba wants to challenge Scar to take back the leadership of the Pride. They said we have to figure out a way to get rid of the hyenas. Like, how do you separate the hyenas from Scar so Simba can challenge Scar mano a mano like that? And they were all arguing about what to do. And as the writers, the producers, the story artists, the directors, all those people are also. And at one point during the discussion, somebody said, maybe Timon should say, "What do you want me to do? Put on a grass skirt, do the hula?" And the producer was like, "Yeah." The director was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, put that in." And it was like one of the biggest laughs in the movie. So,
There's actually a funny thing. I've always noticed this little animation error in that scene that I've always found very funny. He
mhm.
doesn't have this. He doesn't have the lei around his neck when you first see him,
Oh, that's interesting.
and when he
Oh,
turns around, the lei just appears. But you see his neck like from the back. But when he turns around, the lei just magically appears around his neck.
oh,
I've
okay.
always noticed that they just didn't put that in, which I always thought was just kind of
Uh,
funny.
the continuity, it's like 1,500 cuts. You bound to miss one once in a while. So,
Well, and I guess I guess one of the last questions was because you had a very strong input, I guess, in working on the Disney Renaissance because you worked on Little Mermaid, you worked on Beauty and the Beast, you worked on Aladdin, you worked on Pocahontas,
mhm.
and you helped work on characters that have become incredibly famous, like the Genie and Ariel and Beast. And I guess what's it like seeing those characters just now with how incredibly famous those characters have stayed for like over 30 years.
It's very satisfying. It's very when you get a movie that hits really big like that. Because you work on flops also. I worked on Yogi Bear the movie. Like nobody cares about you
Well,
that much.
Osmosis Jones was unfortunately a
Yeah,
very big
yeah,
flop.
you're a Star Chasers. It's just like, so it's funny, because just before Roger Rabbit came out, people were asking, my relatives were asking me, they go, "So you worried about the movie? You think you worried you made a big Howard the Duck or something?" And I said, no, we're not worried about Howard the Duck. We're worried about young Sherlock Holmes. This
Oh.
is a beautiful movie with breakthrough effects, Steven Spielberg, terrific score, and nobody saw it. It's just like, to this day, it pops up on cable, and I start watching it. And after 15 minutes, I look for something else. It, it just doesn't get me. The lead and all. But so that's the thing we were worried about. Like, will this connect with audiences? And and I remember like we had the premiere at Radio City in New York, and I remember like the next day getting up and going down to the theater, the main theater where it was showing, and at Rockefeller Center. And when I came out of the train station and I looked and I saw police barricades and just people six ranks deep going down the block, I was like, oh my God, this is a hit. Wow. It's a great feeling. It's like a home. It's like rounding the bases after a home run. You're like, wow, it worked. So
Well,
I
it's like
I wish I wish everybody out there an experience like that one time. So
Well, it's like I think Genie in particular, with how that's I would say Genie's probably become one of the most famous characters Disney's ever made.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Yeah, and you consider it's all based on one movie. Just 90 minutes. It's such a strong character and all. And there were naysayers while the movie was being made. Like there was some older Disney animators who was sort of like very kind of conservative in their idea of what Disney should be, and they were like, "This movie looks like a Looney Tune. It looks like a Warner Brothers film. It's too broad."
well,
You know.
I know Chuck Jones had said. I remember reading a thing about like how Chuck Jones had said stuff about like Roger Rabbit. I think he had
Yeah,
said like
yeah.
he wasn't a fan of how the Looney Tunes were portrayed. Though from everything I've ever known about Chuck, he
Mhm.
didn't really like most of the Looney Tunes stuff after like 1985.
Yeah, 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 yeah. A lot of the old guys were cranky when some of the newer stuff happened, and it's funny because I didn't really appreciate what they were going thinking until Frozen came out, because they're like, there's a really big hit classic movie that me and my generation had nothing to do with. And it felt a little weird, because I remember when Mermaid came out and all, some of the remaining nine old men were kind of cranky about it, and it's like now I understand what they were going through. It's like, oh, okay, so the circus has moved on. It's like there's new acts and new stars now. Like,
Well, and I guess to end this off, what advice would you want to give to people who are interested in entering the field of animation?
okay, yeah, I would say the film business. I mean, a lot of people are afraid of AI now and saying it's going to wipe us all out, whatever. But this is what they used to say this in the '80s. They would say CG computers are coming, they're going to wipe us all out. And we're doing fine. It's just as busy. And I would say that my what I'd say is that we should learn your basics. Like I always say that every year around Oscar time, all these British actors come here and kick our asses at the Oscars, and because they're all Royal Shakespeare Company. Like they've learned all the important stuff. And the always be grounded in the basics, because no matter how the industry changes, how the technology changes, and which button to push or something, it still goes back to entertainment and narrative storytelling and being funny. And the things that if you master those skills, you can weather whatever transition or whatever technological change might happen. You know, and buy my books. They're doing really well. Oh yeah, I just want to get a plug in too for a couple. Yeah, I've written a couple of books about computer history and digital, but one of the ones I'm proud of. Well, I'm just finishing a book on the 1990s right now, and that hopefully will be out at Christmas. But before that, I wrote a cookbook, and it's called Eat, Drink, Animate. And basically, what happened was after I had worked with Grim Matwick, the designer of Betty Boop, he gave me his personal chili recipe, and I said, "Oh, okay, how to do chili, and then I already had Walt Disney's chili recipe, and then I have a friend who's a producer at Studio Ghibli, and he gave me Miyazaki's personal ramen recipe.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah, because Miyazaki cooks for his crew, and I noticed that people who deal in very visual media, like they very much in things that are virtual, stuff on screen and stuff like that. The way they relax is to do something tactile. Like a lot of them garden, a lot of them refinish furniture, and a lot of them like to cook.
Yeah, one of
So
my close friends is an artist, and she's also like a really really good chef.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. It's something tactile, and you could eat it, and it's also creative, like that. And it was funny because I started calling people, and they never expect a question like this, but it's like, do you have a favorite recipe? you know, like, I got one from Michael Giacchino, and I got one from Pete Docter, and I got like seven Oscar winners, and
oh, so the book is just like people like just film people like recipes
yeah,
basically.
yeah, 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 yeah. I got Chuck Jones' favorite omelet. I got Mary Blair's martini, and everything. I got Mark Davis's martini. Let's see, Bill Hanna sent his family sent me his recipe, a recipe I think for smoked salmon. And it's funny because it goes from very very complicated dishes to very very simple. There was a guy who used to direct death metal videos, and he gave me a recipe for a thing called picklebacks, which is a shot of pickle juice and a shot of bourbon.
Oh my
Throw
God.
back one, throw back the other, repeat. Like, okay, I'm not going to judge. But yeah, yeah, it's like once you start asking people, they all come out of the woodwork and going, oh yeah, I got something, like that. So, and it's fun. The book actually won an award, International Gourmet Magazine. On the film.
Oh, so it's out. Okay, so the
Yeah, oh
book is
yeah, yeah,
out.
yeah. It's
Okay.
on Amazon. It's on Amazon. You can find it.
I'll
But
put a I'll put a link to that in the description.
oh, hey, thank you. Yeah, yeah. It's just not, it's one of these like really silly ideas that you do, just for fun,
Oh,
and just turn out to have a great shelf life.
I give my sister I always get my sister like a unique weird like book for
Hmm.
Christmas every year. And I know a
Hmm.
couple years ago I remembered Vincent Price had cookbooks. And
Oh
I
yeah.
found one of his old cookbooks and I bought it and I gave it to her for Christmas a couple years ago. It was sad. I was hoping it would read like he wrote the recipes like more.
Oh yeah.
I was expecting more Vincent Price-isms when I read through the book. It's
Yeah.
very much a very straight cookbook. There's like occasional bits, but I was hoping it would be a lot more Vincent Pricey when reading
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah. I was trying to like when I was doing mine and all. Uh, yeah, I tried to put in some additional stuff. Like I have a whole chapter on practical jokes because because a lot of the artists, you spend hours and hours and hours sitting at a desk staring into a light, and drawing, and so when people kick back and want to, take it easy, a lot of people play practical jokes on one another. You used to joke around for stuff, and Iwo Takamoto, who was a designer at Hanna-Barbera. Iwo designed Scooby-Doo, and
Yeah.
designed Penelope Pitstop and the Anthill Mob and all. And anyway, he was an assistant on Sleeping Beauty, working under Milt Kahl. And Milt Kahl, as a lot of film people know, was very famous for his bad temper. He's a crotchety old
I
fuss.
know like Richard Williams had like a famous thing he recorded where he talked about a story with like Milt Call where
Yeah.
like
Yeah, yeah, and it's just exactly that kind of thing. That after Milt retired, Ralph Bakshi called him up and asked him if he wanted to work for him, and Milt said, "Nah, if I wanted to keep doing shit, I would have stayed at Disney." But like that's him. But anyway, so with this joke, Ewo was a short guy, and the Disney desks are very big and everything. They're like big. It's like an organ almost. It's like huge. And anyway, so when Milt was away on a break, Ewo got into Milt's desk, like actually climbed underneath and got inside his desk and waited. And he waited until Milt sat down and started animating and started deeply concentrating, like really
Oh
lost
no.
concentration. And then he grabbed his ankles and Milt let out a scream and jumped up and let out every Anglo-Saxon expletive you could possibly. But I was, this is the kind of stuff they used to do. Benny Washam, who was a great animator at Warner Brothers, was a great Chuck Jones animator, was once talking about was taking an entire water bottle out of the office, emptying it out, and filling it up with margarita, margarita mix.
Well, have you ever? I assume you've seen that like blooper reel they did at Warner Brothers, that gag reel they did of like all the guys just goofing around, like
Oh
dressed
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of those. Yeah,
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 I
yeah,
know there's like one of like Leon Schlesinger and like one of the producers like cleaning animation cells, and there's one of like the line of guys like giving each other the hot foot, like putting a match in
yeah.
one guy and then putting a match in the guy who gave the other guy a match. Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, somebody was asking. One of the artists of my generation was asking one of the old guys about, "Did you really do that?" And they go, "Oh yeah, yeah, hot foots. Yeah, we did that. Yeah, oh yeah, you should ruin a guy's shoes. Reading the soul and melt. It's like, I said that was a real thing." And they go, "Yeah, yeah, I used to do that." So, great, but it was a bun, and again too, it's just a way to like sort of like kill the boredom sometimes, a repetition of doing things and all. So that's but it's it's just what it makes life fun. So